What an incredible weekend. It's been so good. It's been so good. You know, I've spoken at different Disciple Nows, and this is usually the place where I share a little bit about myself and maybe show a picture of my family, but I work here, so I'm not going to do that this morning. But if we have not met yet, my name is Jared, and I serve as the young adults pastor here at Central, and I had the absolute honor to speak at Disciple Now this year. I've been a part of 9 Disciple Nows here at Central, and I've worn lots of hats. I've been a leader, I've been a co-host, I've been a runner, and then this year I had the honor of speaking, and it truly was. And let me tell you, life change happened this weekend. Students came to Christ and received salvation. Students want to get baptized. Jesus broke chains that kids have been holding on to and that have kept them in bondage. So many things happened. They served their butts off on Saturday. It was awesome. Life change happened. And it's all because of Jesus. And all around this word, abide. Abide. And how I like to think of abide is you're all in. You're all in. You are all in Jesus. You're not just one way here and another way the other. You're not one foot in the world or one foot in Jesus. No, you are all in. Your faith is all in Jesus. And then, in turn, he's all in you. Because that's what he says in John 15. Abide in me as I abide in you. Jesus is not just a part of your life. He is your life. We are to abide. In Jesus, what he does and what he often did was he gave illustrations and parables, and the one that he uses in John 15 is a vine and branches. And what he says is that he is the vine, the true vine. He is the source of life. And we are the branches that we are supposed to abide in him, to connect to him so that we would bear fruit. And in that passage, he talks about the Father and how the Father is the overseer of the vines and branches. And his objective is for his branches to bear more fruit. And how does he do that? He prunes. He prunes, which is often painful, which we talked about last night. But he does it so that we bear more fruit and give him glory. And these are all great truths. But there is one thing that we have not talked about abiding that is essential. And that is being a part of a church community. You know, there's a temptation coming out of a weekend like this, or even reading the passage in John 15 and think, well, man, I'm connected to Jesus, but I don't really like church. Man, I'm good with Jesus, but I don't want to do the church thing. And that could be for various reasons. Maybe you just feel awkward in church. You feel like you don't fit in, or maybe you had a bad experience in the past. Or maybe, to be honest, maybe you're just too busy. And so I feel like I'm good with Jesus. I'm abiding in Jesus, but I don't want to do church. But here's the truth. You can't be all in with Jesus and out of his church. You can't. You can't abide in Jesus and not be a part of his people. You cannot flourish in your faith without the fellowship of other believers. And when Jesus was teaching the vines and branches, that parable, a small detail when he's teaching in John 15:5, he says, I'm the vine and you are the branches. Branches is not singular, it's plural, because he was speaking to his disciples. Oftentimes when we read Scripture, we read it in an individualistic way, because it's our relationship with Jesus, right? But the thing is that there is no such thing as a solo branch. It's branches. Our lives ought to be intertwined with other branches who are connected to the vine. And I'm not just talking about proximity, but intimacy. And the way that Jesus challenges us, and he challenged his disciples to be intimate with one another, is to love one another. To love one another. To intentionally and sacrificially love one another. John 15, verses 12 through 13 says, and this is the ESV translation, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone laid down his life for his friends. And then you skip down to verse 17. These things I command you so that you will love one another. In order to fully abide in Jesus, he commands us to love one another. But not just love one another, but to love one another the way that he loves us. Well, how do we do that? By being unconditionally and sacrificially committed to one another. Okay, that's good. But how do we do that? How do we do that? How do we love one another in this way? The Bible teaches us. It shows us. It's our playbook. It's our instructions. It shows us how we are to love one another. And in the New Testament, there's all throughout with all the writers, they share these one another's. They talk about these one another's. They command these one another's. And there's about 50 of them in the New Testament. But there's 8 of them that are specific in how we are to love one another. And so this morning what I want to do is I want to look at those 8 together. Not going to be lengthy, but short and succinct. And if you are taking notes, this is definitely a note-taking sermon. All sermons should be note-taking sermons. But this one is going to be for sure. So let's begin. How do we love one another? Well, the first thing is this. We bear one another's burdens. We bear one another's burdens. This comes out of Galatians 6, verse 2. Says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. What's the law of Christ? To love one another. That's the law of Christ. To bear one another's burdens literally means to carry weight. Now, if you've ever moved before or helped somebody move, you know exactly what this means. Because when you go to move, there's things that are just heavy. You got couches and furniture, maybe a dresser, there's beds, there's second floors, like there's stuff that you have to do. If you live in an apartment and you're on the 4th floor, like, man, you want to carry a refrigerator down. Like, you need other people. You can't do that by yourself. It's too heavy for you. And so what do? You call your family. You get your friends. Maybe you hire a service, a moving service, to help you. Because why? Because you can't carry those things on your own. You need help. And in the same way, there are things in life that are just too heavy for you to carry on your own. You need others to carry it with you. Sometimes it's a financial burden, maybe like an unexpected medical expense that happens. You show up and it's just like, I don't have the money for that. And so what we see in the New Testament is that people were willing to help in that way financially so that they don't have that burden anymore. Or maybe it's a physical burden. Maybe you get sick or you're recovering from surgery and you just need help with things around the house. Like you need a meal train, you need to eat, and maybe you just need your grass cut or you just need the house to get clean. And so people come and can help. Or maybe it's emotional burdens. You feel the weight of your anxiety and your depression that is just crippling. It's just so heavy. And grief is hard. You're not meant to carry those things alone. So offering support and a listening ear is so important. And in those moments, especially grieving moments, you're not called to preach to them. You're called to be present. To sit with them and to weep with those who weep. That's how you bear that burden. And you do that for other people as well. We help each other by carrying the weight that's too heavy for us to carry on our own. We're committed to do that together. So bear one another's burdens. The second thing for us this morning is this. Rejoice with one another. Rejoice with one another. This comes from Romans 12, verse 15. He says, rejoice with those who rejoice. And then you see it again in 1 Corinthians 12, verse 26. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. Now, celebration is not just a catchy song from the 80s, okay? It is a biblical practice that we see through all out Scripture. We are called to celebrate. And this is how Dallas Willard says that we should celebrate. He says, celebrating is the completion of worship, for it dwells on the greatness of God as shown in his goodness to us. We engage in celebration when we enjoy ourselves, our life, our world in conjunction with our faith and confidence in God's greatness, beauty, and goodness. We concentrate on our life and our world as God's work and as God's gift to us. We come together with others who know God to eat and drink, to sing and dance, and relate stories of God's actions for our lives and our people. We are to celebrate. We are to celebrate. Now notice, as Dallas Willard kind of looks at Scripture and he kind of succinctly gives his thoughts on celebrating, notice who we're celebrating. God. We celebrate God. Joyful celebrations are not self-centered, they are God-centered. We celebrate by giving God the credit that he deserves for what he is doing in our lives, through us and in us and to us, in our brothers and sisters. We rejoice with those who rejoice. We are filled with joy by seeing what God is doing in somebody else's life. And so we celebrate together, and we celebrate holidays and anniversaries and birthdays and graduations. We automatically do that, but we also celebrate good grades. We celebrate by making the team or the new job or maybe getting a raise or when somebody gets baptized or when somebody comes to Christ or maybe they just take a step in their faith journey and that's a big deal. We ought to celebrate those things because it gives God glory. For any occasion, whether it's steaks at Longhorn or slushies at Sonic, we celebrate. We party, but we party with a purpose, to give him glory. So rejoice with one another. Number 3, accept one another. We accept one another. This comes from Romans 15, verse 7. It says, accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring praise to God. Now this verse that Paul writes comes at the end of a 30-verse appeal to the church in Rome to have unity. You see, the church in Rome was made up of Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians that were very different from one another. And from what he understood, they were not getting along. And so he writes this long letter with great theology and teaching. But then at the end, he says, hey, you need to accept one another. In the way that John Stott comments on this word accept, he says this: it means to welcome into one's fellowship and into one's heart. It implies the warmth and kindness of genuine love. To accept someone is to receive them, to welcome them as they are, just like Christ received and welcomed you just as you were. Mess and all. And so as a youth ministry, our mission is to create safe places where students can laugh. Not just ha-ha laugh, but it's an acronym where students can be loved, accepted, and forgiven. Where they can come as they are, and they will be loved and received and welcomed. And I love that. But, just like the church in Rome, we struggle to accept one another, especially people who are different from us. Those who look different or act different or like different things or talk different, have different personalities, maybe voted differently, maybe they have a different theology. We struggle to accept them, and instead of accepting them, we avoid them or we argue with them. But the truth is, you don't have to agree with them to accept them. I'm going to say that again. You don't have to agree with them to accept them. Jesus disagreed with many of the people that he interacted with, but he accepted them. He welcomed them. He received them. And we should do the same. So what that means is you need to spend time with people that are different from you and seek to understand them, welcome them, eat with them, spend time with them. But here's the thing. If you only spend time with people that are like you, heaven is going to be weird for you. So accept one another. Number 4, never stop seeing one another. Never stop seeing one another. This comes from Hebrews 10, verse 24 through 25. It says, let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. How do we spur one another on towards love and good deeds? By consistently seeing each other, not giving up meeting each other. And I'm curious, what did that look like for the early church? Because he was instructing it to them, but it's also instructing to us. But what did it mean to them? Well, for the early church, what they would do is they would meet in large gatherings at the temple. If they were in Jerusalem, they would meet in the temple, and then they would meet in smaller, informal gatherings in homes. They would eat together and spend time together, love one another. They go from big to small, formal to informal, temple to tables. And that's what we try to strive for today in church. We try to have a large gathering where we come and we worship once a week, but even throughout the week, there's informal gatherings where we have time to be in circles together, to be at tables together. And we have groups on Sunday mornings too, and then we have home groups. We strive, we program that stuff. But how well are we doing in living that out? Statistics are showing that not doing so hot. In 2024, so this past year, Gallup released a survey that roughly 44% of professing Christians are consistently in church. That means every week or almost every week, while 56% are never at church, or at best 12 times a year. What does that mean? This means that most believers, professing believers, that say they're Christians today are in the habit of not meeting together regularly on a Sunday morning, or in groups, or with other believers. Why? The reasons vary. It could be busyness. If we're being honest, it could be laziness. But at its core, I think it's just not a priority. Instead of prioritizing church around other things, we see church as something we come to when nothing else is going on. In other words, we come to church when it's convenient. But here's the truth. Christian community is not built on convenience. It's built on commitment. Commitment. Because what he says, Romans 12:10, be devoted to one another in love. When you come to church, you're not just coming to a service. You're coming because you're committed to the people of this church. When you come to the group, you're not just coming to group just to come to group and talk about stuff. You are to be committed and devoted to the person that you are next to or who's across from you. You are to love one another and not just come here when it's convenient. But you are committed to be here. Your presence matters. We're to love one another. And when we don't make it a priority, we are not loving one another well. Number 5, confess sin to one another. James 5:16 says, therefore confess your sins to one another And pray for one another that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working. The way that Paul says it is this way in Romans 12:9. Let love be genuine. Let love be genuine. The Greek word for genuine is anhupokritos, which is a funny word. But it literally means anti-hypocrite. In your, if you have a Christian Standard Bible, the way that it renders this verse is, let love be without hypocrisy. But today we kind of have like a negative connotation when it comes to hypocrisy. But in the first century, it really didn't have that weight to it. See, in the first century, in the Greco-Roman world, a hypocrite was another word for actor. They would, back in the day, they didn't have like elaborate stage designs or costumes. All they had was a stage, and then they had masks. And so typically an actor would play many characters, and so they would change masks out, and that's how they know that it's a different character. And so that's how they saw a hypocrite was literally, they said it was one who wears masks. That's a hypocrite. And so what Paul is saying here is love one another without wearing masks. But unfortunately, church, our home, our groups have become places, or should I say a stage, where we come and we perform by just wearing masks. You come with a mask saying, I'm okay, when inwardly you are struggling. And here's the thing, if we are wearing masks, we can't genuinely love one another. And you can't genuinely love others, and they can't genuinely love you because all we know is each other's masks. You don't get to know the person. They don't get to know you. And this is what happens. This creates a fake love, which creates fake friends, which isolates you and makes you so lonely. And this has to change. It has to be a priority. In our churches, in small groups, in our families, and with our friends, those places need to be a no-mask zone where we can be honest and authentic. And as James says, that we confess our sin to one another. Because otherwise, we're just performing for people instead of transforming with people. So stop concealing sin. Confess it. Not just one time, but all the time. Stop hiding behind a mask. Instead, experience healing. And as James coaches us in James 5, if you are the one that somebody is confessing to, that is not a time for you to judge them or correct them. He calls you to pray for them so that they can have healing. Pray for them. Pray for them. That's what we're called to do. So confess sin to one another. I challenge you today to stop wearing the mask that you've been carrying and wearing. Throw it away. You don't need that anymore. Number 6, honor one another. We honor one another. Romans 12, verse 10 says, honor one another above yourselves. How the ESV translates it is, outdo one another in showing honor. Now, as a staff, we have 8 staff behaviors. Basically, these are the things that just keep us in line. And one of our staff behaviors is to honor up, down, and all around. So what that means is that we honor our bosses, which ultimately we honor God. He's our big boss. And then we honor our bosses like Brett and Chris. But we also honor our peers, people we work with. And we also honor our our volunteers and we honor the people that we minister to. We honor up, down, and all around. What does that look like? 3 things. And we'll put it on the screen. We eagerly give credit and celebrate others publicly and privately. We don't talk negatively about others publicly or privately. You do what is asked of you publicly and privately. Those are good principles to live your life by. But that is how you honor one another. And if you do that, and you're committed to that, it eliminates the possibility of gossip and slander and rumors and distrust and disrespect. And instead, it fosters humility and trust and encouragement and love and respect. And I don't know about you, I want the latter and not the former. I want to honor others, and I want others to honor me as well, that we honor one another. And just a reminder also, this is not just a New Testament idea. If we go back to the 10 Commandments, the 5th commandment is to honor your father and mother. And so students, these 3 things, that is how you honor your parents. But also adults, that's still a commandment for you too. You don't grow out of obedience. We are to honor our parents. Even if they have passed, you can still honor them. And this is my last little nugget for honoring. Romans 12:10 is the only place in Scripture where it tells us to be competitive. It says, outdo one another in showing honor. And so if you're a competitive person, this is a great way to be competitive, is that you show honor to one another by doing those 3 things. Number 7, encourage one another. 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 11, therefore encourage one another and build one another up, just as you are doing. Encourage one another. Here's a question for you, and if you're a runner, you're going to know probably the answer to this. But for a marathon, so a marathon is 26.2 miles. At what point do most people quit? I heard some people are like, they're saying stuff. When do most people quit? On average, mile marker 20. So they run 20 miles, and then what they say is they hit a wall. It's called the marathon wall, and I have no experience. I have no desire to run a marathon. But I have lots of friends that run marathons, and I was literally, after I preached this in the first service, I had friends who do run marathons, and they're like, yeah, this is for real. And so you hit what's called a marathon wall at right around mile marker 20. You have 6 miles left to go, but it's a grind. And most people quit right around that time because it's physically and mentally exhausting, and even emotionally. But what helps is that you have friends and family that are at the end or even throughout that are saying, hey, you're almost there. Come on, don't give up. You got this. Let's go. Come on, you can do it. Don't give up. You're almost at the end. Don't stop. Keep going. Push. You can do it. And those are the people that finish strong. And the people that don't finish strong don't have people that are cheering them on, because they don't know how far they have left to go. And that is the picture of what it looks like to encourage one another. Because here's the thing, life is hard, and you know it's hard. Life is hard. It has its challenges, and circumstances can be discouraging. Failures and mistakes are a given in life. Tests and trials of our faith are difficult to overcome sometimes. And naturally, there are times where we just want to tap out. We want to be done. We want to quit. But when we have brothers and sisters around us to cheer us on, hey, don't give up. Don't give up. Don't quit. You can do it. Don't stop. We are here with you, and you are there for them as well. Don't stop. Keep pushing, because we have our friends and our family here on earth that are cheering us on, but we also have the applause of heaven, because there's going to come a day where we get to the finish line and Jesus and all of heaven, well done! Come on, let's go. You're almost there. You're almost there. Finish strong. Encouragement gives us courage to start, but it also gives us the endurance to finish strong. So encourage one another. Life can be so discouraging. Encourage one another. And lastly, we serve one another. We serve one another. This comes from Galatians 5, verse 13, and says, "For you are called to freedom, brothers. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love, serve one another." When I was ordained, Pastor Mark presented me with a bowl and towel. And he said something very powerfully to me that it's a constant reminder throughout the weeks and days. He said, as a pastor, you're called many things. A shepherd, a counselor, a teacher, a preacher. But your most important job is to be a chief feet washer. He gave me this bowl and this towel as a reminder that we are to take the lowly position of a servant and live a life of service to you and to others. And so we have this, I have this in my office as a reminder for that. But being a feet washer is not just a pastor job. It's for every follower of Jesus. At the Last Supper, Jesus washed his disciples' feet, and he said, "You also ought to wash one another's feet, for I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done to you." We are all to be feet washers. And here's the thing, washing feet is humbling. Serving is humbling. It challenges us to not look to be served, but to serve. Feet washing is a dirty job, especially in the first century, because they wore sandals. But that's a reminder that there ought to be nothing that you are too above. That you're willing to do anything to serve people, to help people. You're not above any task. Serving is a dirty job. Also, serving is not self-seeking. It's not looking for a reward or recognition, but you do it out of pure love for others. And so when you come to church, or when you wake up in the morning, you go and get dressed and eat breakfast and all the things, and you're about to go to work, and my challenge to you is to not go and look for other people to wash your feet. But as you get up in the morning, don't forget your towel. No matter where you go, especially here, you come with your towel ready and saying, "I'm willing to serve wherever you need me. I'm willing to serve you, and I'm committed to serve you. Where do you need me? Where do you want me? I'm ready." So don't leave the house without your towel, because this is what you're called to. We're called to serve one another. Abiding is difficult. It's challenging. And oftentimes because we're trying to do it on our own. But that's the point of the illustration that Jesus gives us. We're not supposed to do it on our own. We're supposed to stay connected to him and abide in him. We are to be dependent on him. But also we need one another. We need to love one another, and that's what he has commanded us to do. And the way that he commands us is to be intertwined, to be committed, sacrificially and unconditionally. How do we do that? Well, we're bearing one another's burdens, rejoicing with one another, accepting one another, never stop seeing one another, confessing sin to one another, honoring one another, encouraging one another, serving one another. And when we do that, we become branches. That's what we're called to. That's the life of a branch. Together.